Meat. Meat can often be the star of the show when it comes to a great meal. I've had fantastic moments because of meat, where it's cooking a whole lamb over an open fire for 8 hours, letting every part of the lamb perfectly cook in different ways. Or whether it's going to see Dario Cecchini in Tuscany, picking up a delicious steak and then taking it back to my friends in the Alps and hosting a perfect meal overlooking Mont Blanc. Meat is fantastic, but meat can also make a meal difficult. In this episode, I want to talk to you about meat. I want to share with you what you should be buying, how you should be cooking it, understand the differences between different cuts, and understand where you can improve your game when you're out cooking camping meals. I've got a delicious recipe lined up for you, which summarizes for me the key things that we're going to learn about meat in this episode. Right, let's get started. My name is Michael, I'm the chef camper, and now you can be one too. Allons-y. This is episode 5 of my introduction to campervan cooking, teaching you what I think is all the basics that you need to know in order to pull off memorable meals when you're out camping. It's everything I'd wish someone had told me the moment I became a chef, and I just feel it will give you all a head start if you want to go out and create amazing meals. So in true chef camper style, I'm going to keep this really simple. I think there are 2 types of meat that you really want to be focusing on. Your first one is your lean meats, and these are the meats that don't really have much fat on them. They don't really have much, they're not tough meats. They're very soft and tender meats. Now for me, lean meats are quite straightforward, and I think most people will know that you've just got to season them well, you've got to sear them well, and you've got to cook them to the right temperature. That's lean meat. And we're going to park that today because I think it's the second part of meat, which is where I think you'll learn the most from today. So within this second section of meat, let's then break that down again into 2 further sections. Let's talk about meats that are fatty, and let's talk about meats that are quite tough. Now, there's a lot of meat that sits within the middle in between both of those camps, but let's just focus on them in different ideas and different concepts to begin with. So first of all, fatty meat. Fat starts rendering down at 55 degrees. If you start taking it to that temperature and leaving it at that temperature, that fat is going to render down, it's going to melt, and it's going to add lots of juicy flavor to the meat. Here's where things can get a little bit tricky. If there's a lot of fat on it, but it's a lean meat, think pork loin, then that fat will render down, but the lean section of that cut, the loin, will then dry out. So what do we do here? Well, we have to trim some of that fat off, which if you've watched episode 1, you'll see on the pork chop, I trimmed the fat off and rendered it down separately. It wasn't chewy. Those crispy, delicious pork scratching bites were fantastic. Now, when you look at fat, there are different shades, different colors. If you look at fat that's, let's talk about mature steak. So let's talk about the difference between an old mature dairy cow steak and a traditional steak. For the dairy cow steak, you can see the fat is kind of a deep yellow, and this for me is flavor. This demonstrates that this fat is mature and it's got that mature flavor to it. Whereas when the fat is just bright white, that's a relatively young piece of fat. It probably hasn't been dry aged for as long, and it's not going to have as much flavor. It will still have flavor because it's fat, but the flavor won't be as complex as a darker colored fat. Let's talk about another key component within meat, and this is a connective protein tissue called collagen. Now, collagen can be mistaken for fat, and fat can be mistaken for collagen. But when we talk about collagen and what it does, it basically holds the meat together, it holds it tight, and collagen can make meat feel tough. However, to stop it from feeling tough, similar to fat, we can break it down. Now, collagen tends to break down at a slightly higher temperature, between 70 and 80 degrees centigrade. But like fat, it needs time. You need to go at it slow. One of the best cuts of meat is a meat that's got some collagen and it's got some fat, because if you can break down the collagen and make the meat tender, and you can add some fat to it for flavor, then you've got something that's very juicy, falls off the bone, eat it with a spoon, that sort of stuff. Now, if you're cooking a piece of meat that hasn't got much fat but is quite a tough piece of meat, then you're running the danger of it drying out. So if you overcook this meat, it will dry out. And this is why we have things like stews and we braise stuff, because if you get a tough piece of meat and you put it in a liquid and you braise it or you stew it down, that liquid within the roasting tray or within the pot will try and keep the meat moist. It can still go a little bit dry, so be careful, but ultimately that will stop it from going completely dry. So we've learned a little bit about fat and how that adds flavor and the different types of fat you can get. We spoke a little bit about collagen and how that makes tough meat and how you've got to break it down. This is unlocking for me what we would call low and slow. This is all about putting a lower temperature and cooking it for a longer period of time. And that longer period of time gives the fat chance to render down and gives the collagen chance to break down. And when those two things happen together, you are in meat heaven, trust me. Okay, we've spoken about lean meat and we've spoken about high fatty muscular meat. So let's talk about what we're actually going to buy when it comes to getting to the shop. So, as always, I would recommend you go and meet a butcher. Even if you're in a foreign country, sometimes they're really friendly, sometimes they're not, but it's always worth just going and having a look at the counter because they like to display good cuts of meat, generally speaking. They often have pride in their work and pride in their meat. Now, when we're looking at lean meat, so let's talk about pork chops or steaks, what we're looking for is a marbling effect of fat. This is when you get, it almost sometimes looks a bit like a feather of fat running through the meat. And what this tells me is that if you cook that piece of lean meat, that fat is going to render down and slowly melt into the meat and add lots and lots of flavor. So if you're cooking something that's cooking direct, then look for something with lots of marbling in, and then you're going to have a juicy piece of meat. So what do you want to look for if you're purchasing meat that's high in fat and maybe high in collagen? Well, as always, to strike up that conversation with the butcher again, once you start building a relationship with your butcher, they're going to start offering their skills, their expertise, and start talking you through the different cuts of meat. But don't worry, I'm here too, and whilst I might not know a lot, I do know a little bit. And I think one of the perfect pieces of meat you can start off with to really understand everything we've spoke about today is the pork belly. Pork belly has a high fat content. You've got this thick layer of fat on the top, but it's in layers. So we've got a layer of fat, a layer of meat, a layer of fat, a layer of meat. And in between those layers, we have collagen. So we have the fat, we have the meat, we have the collagen, we have the fat, we have the meat. So a pork belly is a prime example where a piece of meat has a combination of collagen and fat in a way that's nicely marbled throughout the meat. It's not just on one side, it's not just in the center, it goes in layers throughout the meat. So I think this is a perfect piece of meat for you to understand what collagen and what fat can really do to a piece of meat. So I think the pork belly is the perfect meat for us to demonstrate what we've learned today. We're going to render down the fat, we're going to render down the collagen, we're going to make a fantastic sauce using the principles we learned in the previous episode, mise en place. We're going to set up the cob barbecue for offset cooking, which we learned in episode 2 of this Cookery School. And we're going to add loads of flavor, which is what we learned in episode 1. And what we also learned in episode 1 was making things easy and simple for yourself. So my plan is to have this nice meal later on tonight, but I'm going to do my mise en place, which is what we learned last week. So let me talk you through what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. So first off, I'm going to light my cob. So I'm going to use these great little handles, lift up the base, and look at that, someone's already made it ready for me to use. Ladies and gentlemen, the cob is back. That's right, the cob is back to ChefCampers. I'm so excited about using this because I have been using the cob for over 10 years, and when I went traveling full time in the van, and when, we still live in a van, the cob always had a place on my van. I didn't have much storage space, but I always made room for one of these, and that's because I think they are the greatest offset cooker that you can buy. I genuinely feel that way about them because they are the most efficient barbecue and they give you a great cooking surface. And as we said in episode 2, kind of barbecue and offset cooking, this for me just does that perfectly and effortlessly, and it's a great piece of kit. Now, little disclaimer folks, I have now decided that I might start selling cobs, which you're going to see more of them, but if you go back and have a look at my whole catalogue, you'll know that I've been using these on my channel for years and years and years, and I've always told people to go and buy them from the different outlets. I just thought now it might be time for me to offer my personal unique experience and advice to you. So if you're thinking about getting one, or you want to change, or you want to upgrade, then I can offer the expertise that I've got. If you don't know much about these cobs yet, then go and check out one of my old videos. What cob barbecue, what have I learned in the past 8 years? I'll put a link in the description below. But yeah, so today I'm going to be using briquette fuels. Now, like we said in episode 2 of my Campervan Cookery School, briquettes give us a slightly lower temperature but burn for a longer period at a more consistent pace, and that's exactly what I need for this recipe. So briquettes are on. I'm just going to let them do their thing whilst I prep everything else. So we're going to take the pork and place it in to our roasting tray. I've also got these dry bouquet garnis. It's basically a bay leaf, some rosemary, some thyme, all tied together, dried herbs. You pick them up in supermarkets or whatnot. I'm going to pop that in there as well for a bit of flavour. I'm also going to add something else to this tray. I'm going to go in with a little bit of cider. Now, this is some leftover swag I've got from France, cidre we would say, but I would always opt for some English stuff because we know England's better than France, don't we? That's a joke, by the way. The French do cook very good food, but the British have got great pork and great cider, so deal with it. So we're going to get some of the cider, and I'm just going to pour this into the tray. And I'm also going to top it up with just a little bit of stock. My briquettes are now ready to start cooking on. So I'm going to put the standard rack on with the roast rack on top. I'm going to get my pork that's in the tray with the stock, place that on, get my lid and place that down. I'm going to leave the vent open on the lid because, as we said in episode 2, that gets the temperature higher because there's more oxygen. And after about half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm going to close down the vents, slow down the cooking and lower down the heat. Before I start doing my prep and my mise en place, I just thought I'd show you one of the great things I love about the cob. Once I've got this cooking and ready to go, the base is cool to touch. You can put this on your plastic camping table. And I don't have to worry about that melting or causing any damage. And now that frees up all of my cooking space here to get everything else ready. So what I might do now is maybe make a nice sauce, prep the potatoes, maybe prep the tender stem broccoli, just get everything I want together. My potatoes are now part boiled, so I'm going to place them into a little bowl and just let air dry them out, and that way they'll go a little bit fluffy, and then when it comes to service later on, I can just literally chuck them on the cob with some olive oil, some garlic, some salt, some rosemary, and then just roast them as I'm getting the meat ready. So mise en place, potatoes, done. Now for this dish, I'm going to serve it with a cidre sauce. Now, if you've watched episode 4, you'll know what I'm on about when I talk about making sauces. If you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. I'm making all these episodes so you can learn how to cook. Anyway, we're going to go in with the shallots, the garlic, and then instead of wine, we're going to go in with the cider. We're going to reduce that down until it's sticky. We're then going to top it up with some cider and veg stock or pork stock as a combined, and then take that down 50%. We're then going to hit it with the creme fraiche at the end, and then if I'm feeling luxurious, which I usually am, I'm going to monte it with the butter. So voila, let's go. You don't need to see this. Go back and watch episode 4. Right, here we go. The pork belly is just cooking along in the background. My tender stem broccoli from Kate is nicely trimmed and ready to go. My potatoes are part boiled. They're just drying out now. I might just pop them in the fridge. It's a split shift today, which is a bit like what we do in the restaurant world. We work in the morning, we prep, and then we come back in the evening and do the victory dance whilst delivering great food to people. This is quite simple and straightforward, and hopefully you picked up some of the principles that I've been using. The mise en place layout of everything. I'm cooking indirectly. I'm making a sauce. We're choosing the right cut of meat, cooking it in the right way. I've added flavor to that sauce using the principles that we spoke about in episode 1. So this is now all starting to come together. So I think you're ready to cook this one. So give it a go. Right, I'm going to catch you later on when it's mealtime. I'm probably going to open up a bottle of wine or cider and enjoy it. So see you in a bit. I couldn't find the wine. I had no beer, but thankfully I had gin and tonic. I've only had a few. It is now time to plate up the pork. It was roasting in the cob for about 4.5 hours. I made sure the liquid didn't run out, and at one point I actually wrapped it in foil, and I've now just took it off and I've just let it rest, and it's just very, very juicy, very soft. The fat has rendered down, the collagen has rendered down, so we have just got layers of beautifulness going on there. Inside the cob, there's pot boiled potatoes that I did earlier on. I put into a roasting tray, and as you can see, we've just got some nice crispy little potatoes, and I put some tender stem broccoli on the cob as well just now, just to slightly roast it a little bit because I think that's tasty. My sauce is all ready to go. It's all nice and warmed up. Now for the chef friends watching, I should really pass it through a chinois, a fine sieve, but to be honest, I quite like it with the shallots in and the different stuff in it, so I'm just gonna have it as it is. Now this might not look that pretty on the plate, but this is all about flavor. So let's plate up. I'm gonna go a little bit sauce on the bottom. I'm going to place the pork belly on top of the sauce. I'm then going to pop a few of those potatoes just around it, like so. This is one of those dishes that I just absolutely love cooking. It's one of my favorite dishes actually. And then we're just going to put a couple of stems of that roasted tender stem from Kate on the side, and we want it a little bit crispy. And there we are. This is a proper cut of meat. The collagen is rendered down, the fat has rendered down, the potatoes are crispy, the broccoli is roasted, the sauce is fantastic. This, I need to dig into it. I'm gonna get some shots now and then I'm gonna dig into it. I've nearly finished my plate without telling you what this tastes like. First of all, we don't need the knife because the pork is that juicy, that tender. You could use a spoon to literally portion it. It's that juicy. It's such a perfect dish for me because controlling that sort of cut of meat that's relatively cheap in a slow, controlled way, rendering down the fat, rendering down the collagen, and cooking it on a barbecue indirect is just a beautiful way to cook it. Match that up with a beautiful sauce that we've made the proper way, none of that jar nonsense. And then with some roast potatoes and some roasted tender stem from Kate, this is a cracking dish. It's a marriage made in heaven for me. And that's why I've nearly eaten half of it without even, remembering to tally it. I'm just mesmerized. I'm in my zone right now. We're next to the van. We're outside. We're eating good food. Life is good. So on that note, if you've liked this, let me know below in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, whatever, all that other YouTube stuff. And stay tuned because I want to do more recipes every week and I want to do more episodes and I've got loads lined up. I'll see you soon. Ta-ra.